Good day, everyone, and welcome inside a new Flames podcast. Yes, the Red Mile Rundown podcast comes to you here. I am John Easthope. Alongside me is Robert. How are you, Robert?
I'm doing great. I am super excited to kick off this podcast with you.
Yeah, me too. I'm very excited that we're able to team up here and get this going, and hopefully we can provide something that we've discussed. It's kind of missing around the Flames market, and that's a brand new Flame podcast. Good opinions and good conversation. Robert, lots coming up on the show today. Where do you want to start?
Well, first off, I just kind of maybe want to talk a little bit about the pod and how it
Yeah.
kind of came to be. So for those of you that don't know, John and I, we did about 5 or 6 episodes of his Double Digit Hockey show together last year. And we met online, we met through the podcast, and just through talking Flames with John, I just felt like there was like a real sort of chemistry between us two. And I've always wanted to be on a Calgary Flames podcast, and I was always kind of looking for the right partner. And based off our chemistry in those few episodes, I thought that you and I would have a great partnership here. So we thought it'd be fun to start a Calgary Flames centric podcast. We're not going to be talking a lot of like overall NHL. I would say it's going to be overwhelming majority of Calgary Flames talk, because if you want to go get your NHL talk, there's a million different podcasts you can go to out there. But if you want to talk like strictly Calgary Flames, there's not really like a ton of audio content out there for just Calgary Flames. So John and I, we want Flames fans to be able to come here and just get strictly like hardcore Calgary Flames talk, and maybe talk about some sort of like different topics than lots of other people are talking about as well. So I am very excited to get this going. We're going to be dropping 1 episode a week every Tuesday morning throughout the entire year. And that's going to go into next summer, past free agency. So there's going to be a lot of hockey talk here, and I am very excited to kick things off with you here, John.
Yeah, me too. Thanks for that rundown there. I was extremely happy when I was able to talk to Robert, and he was with me through my journey of double digit hockey, and then through the summer as I was trying to organize a new podcast, and we just organically kind of just happened that we connected here and we connected to do this show here. So I'm really excited to get it going. Really excited to specialize. As anyone who watched my old podcast, Double Digit Hockey, knows that I try to cover a lot, and it was a lot of work, and I enjoyed doing it, but to specialize and take on this role and talk about a team that I grew up cheering for. Very excited to be doing this. Very excited to be taking on this project, and I'm excited to go all season long. Hopefully there's a lot of storylines for us, and we're not just having a trudge of a season where it's all negative, where that's another reason why I want to do this show as well. We had a lot of negative around the Flames and around the city of Calgary, a lot of players leaving, a lot of turnover around the team. So it'd be fun to talk about this team as they now try to turn the corner, rebuild, and become an organization that we can be more proud of. And so they're really looking forward to this journey this year, Robert. And it started off in Penticton this past weekend. We actually just watched a little behind the curtain. We're recording Monday night to record this for you folks. We just finished watching the Flames wrap up the Penticton tournament. So why don't we start there? Let's give our thoughts on what we saw in Penticton. Why don't you go ahead and start us off here, Robert?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I thought overall the Flames played pretty well. They went 1-1-1. They were by far the youngest team in the tournament. So for them to come out, 500, I actually thought was a pretty decent result overall. And then when I think, we're going to break down some individual players here, both some positives and maybe like a little bit of negatives. So I'll kick things off. Why don't we go back and forth? I'll do one player I liked, and then you can maybe do one player, and we can kind of have a discussion about them. But I know, like, for me personally, when watching something like Penticton, I'm not really looking for wins and losses. I'm not looking at guys who are playing great defense. I'm not looking for like system play. I'm just kind of looking for guys to make plays. Because I found in the past, guys who have been successful in Penticton and went on to NHL careers, they've always been able to stand out making plays in Penticton in that type of environment. So I'm just looking for guys that, they make tape-to-tape passes on the breakout. They play well in the offensive zone. They make their line mates better. They're creating offense, creating passes, creating scoring chances. Those are kind of the things that I'm looking for in a tournament like this. So with that being said, I guess we'll kick things off. So the first guy I would bring up is Andrew Basha. I thought like he was outstanding in those 3 games. And he's one of the younger players in the tournament as well. And he stood out every night for me. And for me, it was just the speed, the skating, like you could just tell like he's a very dynamic player. He was making a lot of great passes. His shot looked pretty solid, especially on that one-timer goal on Saturday.
Beautiful.
I watched Andrew Basha, and I when watching him, like when you watch like a junior player, like that guy's going to play in the NHL one day. It just looks a little different. That's kind of what I saw with Andrew Basha throughout the weekend. So I'm very excited to see what he can do over the next 2 to 3 years. So I would say he was probably the best forward, probably outside of Sam Morton, but kind of the most positive forward to come out of Penticton this weekend.
Much like you, I watch these tournaments knowing the situation that these players are in. The youngest team in this tournament by quite a bit, actually, if you look at the age numbers. You go into this and you think, okay, stats don't tell the story, and they probably won't tell the story of this tournament. And Andrew Basha is a perfect example of that. Like you mentioned there, he did a bunch of things in a bunch of different ways, and to show his skill and strength. He doesn't come out with like 3 goals, 3 assists, and his stat line wasn't all that impressive, but his play was impressive, and how he approaches going up against guys that were 2, 3, 4 years older than he was. Those who know me know I watched the Western Hockey League a lot, and so I've actually seen Basha for a couple of years here, and you see the skill coming through, and that's just how he is. He plays. He knows he's a smaller guy. He knows how to use that to his advantage, and we saw that in this tournament. You would noted that goal from Misa, that beautiful pass and that beautiful finish. That's Andrew Basha's game. That's what you're going to see, and you're going to see effort every night. I really, really like that. I'm glad that's where you started, Robert, because that was a guy on my list as well. I want to go on the defense, and a guy who I think was the best defender across this tournament for the Flames. He didn't play in the final game, but Hunter Prstevich through 2 games. He started a little slow, but each period he seemed to get better and better and better. And the one thing I really want to note from his play in this tournament is defensively, he was a lot better than some people were trying to make him out to be. He was positionally fairly sound, very active stick in his own zone, and he seemed to anticipate the play a lot better than what some might give him credit for. We're all up on his numbers and how good of a scorer he can be and how he creates. But I think what he does in his own zone really sets off his game, and I want to highlight that before giving him his props offensively, because he was creating. It was noted he was on power play 1 by you to me in the first couple of games there. He led the power play units for the Flames, the little opportunities that they got, and I think he really, really looked good in the couple of games he got for the Flames.
Yeah, I completely agree. I thought he was pretty much by far the best defenseman for the Flames over the weekend. And the thing that just sticks out to me is poise. Like that guy just has a lot of poise with the puck.
Good word.
Like he's very calm. Like he doesn't panic when he's under stress. I thought he was super impressive. And in the offensive side of the game, he scored a nice goal on Friday. I believe he had an assist as well. Like I just thought he was really, really good. And you could tell by the Flames sitting him along with Stromgren and Morton that they thought that those 3 players in particular had really, really good tournaments and kind of giving them a night off heading into main camp. So I think that kind of spoke a lot. And like you said, like we were texting each other on Saturday. We're both like, well, like, Zane Parek's not on the first power play unit. It's Hunter Prstevich, which I thought was pretty interesting.
Very interesting.
Yeah, I completely agree. Thought he was really good. Another guy that stood out to me, go back to the forwards. I really liked Luke Misa's game. He's the 5th round pick from 2024. He was used. He's one of the draft picks from the Elias Lindholm trade. So that trade tree is kind of continuing to grow. And
is awesome.
Fantastic. But over the weekend, I just really thought he was a smart player, very skilled, made plays. He's just one of those guys that you notice when he's on the ice. And I know he's not the biggest guy out there, but I still think he's very effective, and he's just got great hands, good vision. And even he was one of the guys that stood out to me at the rookie camp in July. I thought he was one of the best forwards at that event as well. Mm-hmm. So, for a 5th round pick, for an 18-year-old, man, he was good at a tournament like this. So that's someone who I think Flames fans should start to get pretty excited about. I could see him being a future NHLer in, 3, 4, 5 years kind of thing.
I like that pick a lot because I'm a big fan of his brother, and we'll talk about him maybe later down the road here. But this is a guy who knows what his size is and knows how to be effective using his size. Again, not the biggest in stature, but the skill shows. Really good in the face-off dot, a lot better than I thought he would be, and he really seemed to be aggressive in his gameplay. And knowing what his game and his role was supposed to be in this tournament, I really liked Luke Misa. Quiet player though too, right? He doesn't have a lot of flashiness to his game. It's very direct and it's very calm, and I like his composure in the game as well. A guy that I really enjoyed watching, and it's a guy, again, Western Hockey League. I get a little biased with these guys, but when the Flames picked Jaden Lipinski, I was kind of like, okay, because I saw how he played in Vancouver, and I'm like, it was fine. It was just fine for me. But every viewing since he was drafted, he seems to get better and better and better. And he wasn't used a ton in this tournament. He played like a third line checking role, but he was dynamic in doing so. He won his faceoffs. They had him out late in his last game against Vancouver. They're trying to get the equalizer goal and 6-on-5 opportunity. And I just like how composed he was in the faceoff dot. I like how composed he was in running his line. And again, a nice quiet game from him. But I thought when he was given his opportunities, he took advantage of those opportunities. He had a lot of different line mates throughout these 3 games that he played in this tournament. A lot of different line mates. It seemed like every period and a half he had 2 new guys with him in this tournament. And I just liked how he was able to command that line, drive that line. And if you are a Flames fan, like you are if you're listening, that's what Flames lack right now in the organization is centermen that can drive the play. And I think Lipinski's on the road of being an effective player. He can do that, and hopefully he can continue to grow into an NHLer that can do that.
Yeah. In my notes here for today's episode, the first thing I wrote down about Jaden Lipinski is that there's NHL upside there. Like, I really believe that. Now, I don't think he's ever going to be a skilled top 6 center, but is he a guy that could fit in the bottom 6 and penalty kill and be kind of like that big physical presence? You know, I think he could be potentially if he keeps on this trajectory that he's on, because I think he's taken major strides. Like you said, I mean, when the Flames drafted him, I think he was a 4th round pick. It was one of those guys where, you know, if they hit, that's fantastic. If they don't, they don't. And I'm really starting to see him take some big time strides in his game. And I thought he made an impact in all 3 games in Penticton. You know, you watch the games and you could tell like his skating has gotten quite a bit better. He's got good size. I think he can win draws, play on the penalty kill, like all like the not so sexy stuff of the game. I think he's quite good at. So I would definitely agree with you on that one. And we can't not talk about Sam Morton when we're talking about Penticton.
Agreed.
Because he was the Flames' best player in those 2 games that he played. Now, the big caveat obviously being that he is 25 years old. So like, you know, Morton's like what, 6-7 years older than Zane Parekh is. Like that's just like ridiculous. How much it is ridiculous. And that's just like how much older he is than all these guys out there. I mean, he's mainly playing against like 18 to 22-year-olds for most of the weekend. So, you know, because of that, you want Sam Morton to stand out because of that maturity and that time that he's had to work on his game. So, you know, him being the best Flames forward, like that's awesome. But at the same time, I still do kind of question like his overall upside. Like I've been seeing a lot of people online saying, you know, the Flames might really have something in Sam Morton, or I could see him starting on the Flames NHL roster to start the season, like on the 4th line. And I would just say pump the brakes on that for now. Just because of his age and all that kind of stuff. So like I wouldn't put too much pressure on him. If he can come into the Flames organization and be like a good top 6 center for the Wranglers for a few years, I think that's a big win. And if he ends up playing NHL games, that's a massive win. But I think we should kind of set expectations for this player. But you know, with all that being said, he was great this weekend. Just some things that stood out to me was that he's a really good skater. He's got kind of a sneaky good shot. We saw that on Saturday. He made some good plays. Yeah, I was pretty impressed with the guy. So, like I said, you can't talk about Penticton without talking about Sam Morton this week.
Sam Morton did exactly what Sam Morton should have done at this tournament. I kind of would have liked to see him against Vancouver and those older players Vancouver brought. But at the same time, Sam Morton did what he needed to do in this tournament. He put his name on the radar. He showed up and he had a really good couple of games and he led the Flames like he should have. Now he needs to bring that to main camp and see if he can challenge these guys that are at the bottom of the Flames roster. I'm much like you. I don't quite see the NHL potential there. Like I had people try to defend him in my DMs saying, how could I not give this guy the fourth line center role over Rooney? Well, go watch Rooney's game, go watch Sam Morton's game. There's a big difference right there at the moment. So he has a lot to prove, but at the same time, he was the best Flame at this tournament in the forward group. He led and he did exactly what he needed to do, and that's what you want to see from a guy like that. When you bring him in, you're not sure. The reason why he was there, the Flames weren't sure exactly what they had in this guy. They liked the guy, they like what he can bring, and they wanted to see it, and that's what they saw in the 2 games he played. Really good tournament from Sam Morton. He is impressive, and if that's your leader on the Wranglers forward group, perfect. That's a depth guy you can add to your organization, and who knows, maybe he moves to the wing and gets a fourth line role in the Flames down the road here. All of this is win after this point for the Calgary Flames with Sam Morton. I hummed and hawed over other guys that I could bring up here because I really try not to be negative with this group, but I really want to bring up a guy who's picked in later rounds from the Flames as well, and that's Henry Muse on the back end. He didn't see a ton of top 4 minutes, but he saw every game, and he played a good role on those games. And when he was given the opportunity, he showed what he was made of. He showed his adaptability to play a more defensive role that was asked of him from Trent Kroll in this tournament. And he did a really good job of it. He moved the puck. He was positionally sound, and he didn't ever seem out of position to me. And I really enjoyed the way he used his legs to get himself out of trouble if he needed to. But that first pass, for a kid who's played junior hockey and he's that young, to have that type of first outlet pass, really impressive from the young kid and what he brought for the Flames. And again, just adding to that Flames depth on their prospect pool, just Henry Muse just deserves a little bit of credit here for the role that he took on. That's a lot different from the role you see him play in junior hockey, where he is the go-to guy, the power play guy. He didn't get those minutes with the Flames in this tournament. He got the stay-at-home third pair type of minutes, and he actually excelled. And I really like what I saw from Muse this weekend.
Yep, totally agree with you on that. There's really not much too more to add to that. The one thing that did kind of stick out to me that I was a little surprised by with Muse was that like he's kind of nasty. He's got a little bite to his game. He's got a little mean streak. Like I noticed, like he was consistently like throwing like big cross checks. He was pretty physical. Like he was chirping. He took a couple penalties. Like to be honest, I haven't watched Henry Muse play up until now. I didn't watch him with the 67s, and I just assumed that he's like a super skilled defenseman. But like I did not expect that bite from him, so I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I agree.
So Henry Muse, great pick. So maybe we'll move on to some more like honorable mentions. We don't have to dive into these guys too much,
sure.
but like from a positive standpoint. So I'll mention 2 guys, and I'll combine them into one because I think they're like essentially the same player, and that's Parker Bell and Lucas Siona. They're both late round draft picks, both guys out of the WHL, both big. They can both skate. They're physical. And that's something that in the Calgary Flames prospect pool, they don't have a ton of at the moment. Kind of those guys that get in your face, get in on the forecheck, hit, fight. Those guys, I thought they really stood out this weekend as people who put in the work, who are physical. They're not the most talented guys in the world. They're not the most skilled guys out there, but I thought they worked really hard and they brought something different to the team that I thought was needed. So just kind of an honorable mention to those 2 guys. Do you have a couple more guys that you want to bring up?
I do, but really quickly, that's Parker Bell in a nutshell. If you watched the Western Hockey League and you saw what Parker Bell did this weekend for the Flames, that's Parker Bell's game. I love it. That guy is awesome to watch. Awesome to watch. I have one guy I really want to do honorable mentions for because this guy is getting a lot of, he was traded for Chris Tanev. And so we expect him to be the next Chris Tanev. And if you take that expectation and throw it in the garbage where it belongs and just look at Greshnikov's game and what it's supposed to be, he actually, I thought, had a very solid weekend. He played with a couple of different guys, but he showed his ability to be a stay-at-home guy. He showed his ability to be rough when he needed to be rough. He knows he has a decent first pass. He just played his game, and he didn't have to worry about anything when he was on the ice because it looked like he was in control of what it is. Now he's raw, and there's a lot of work still to be done for his game for him to get to the next level. But I think for what you look at him and where he is in this tournament, I really like what I saw from Greshnikov. Just stop comparing him to Chris Tanev.
Could not agree more with you on that. I've seen that comparison online. I heard it on the broadcast and a lot. Yeah. And it's honestly, it's kind of unfair to Grishnikov because, comparing yourself to Chris Tanev, I mean, that he's literally, one of, if not the best defensive defenseman in the NHL. So to put that comparison, I don't really think it's fair to the kid, but I understand.
And that's not his game either.
And it's not his game. But like I do understand what people are saying. Like Grishnikov is that shutdown defensive defense.
Yeah, he is.
Like I get it, but yeah, let's kind of hold the brakes here on comparing him to Chris Tanev. Now, kind of moving on, I don't want to call these negatives because really, I didn't come away from this tournament thinking like, wow, like that was a super disappointing performance from anybody. These are more, let's call them, up in the air or just some different guys to talk about. So like, I think we should start with Zane Parekh because he had the most hype coming into this tournament. Flames first round pick, 9th overall, probably the most hype prospect on the Calgary Flames since Matthew Tkachuk. Easy. So they're big time. And so there were a lot of expectations for Parekh coming into the weekend. And overall, I thought it was very hit and miss. So what I mean by that is the good of Parekh, the skating, the passing, the shot, the way he walks the blue line on the power play. Like there are some phenomenal tools with this player. Like you watch him, you're like, this guy is extraordinarily talented. And you can totally see that kind of number 1D running a power play sort of upside in his future. But there were some things that I did not like in his game. And the main one being the turnovers. I thought he was incredibly sloppy with the puck throughout the entire weekend. It looked like he was trying to do too much. It looked like he thought that he was better than the competition out there. Like he thought he was better than everybody else out there. And he thought he could get away with essentially making fancy, risky plays throughout the entire weekend. And it just did not pay off for him. I think it was a bit of a wake-up call that, hey, like this next level above the OHL is different. And you can't get away with all the stuff you're doing in the OHL that you can in the AHL and the NHL. So I'd be curious to get your thoughts on Parex's weekend. But the big thing for me was it was the turnovers and just like the lackadaisical type of play from him. I didn't really like that. I would have liked to see more intensity and just a little more smart puck movement from him. But like I had mentioned before, I mean, you can tell the talent is certainly there.
Oh man, I please don't come at me on Twitter when I say stuff like this, but it's okay not to fall in love with the first time you see a prospect in a game like this. Parekh, for me, on Friday looked like he got hit in the mouth. And by that, I don't mean physically hit in the mouth. I just feel like the competition's like, no, this isn't junior. We're not just going to let you weave and round us here. There's more structure at this level, at the next level. There's more playmakers at this level. And it's not going to be as easy as walking a fourth line OHL centerman. You got to actually work for some things. And so I really like what you put, where you said he tried to do too much. And I think he tried to continue to be, well, I am a 9th overall pick. I can be here. I'm here for a reason. And I'm going to show everyone how great I am. Where we really would like to see him take a little bit more of onus on the whole game, the whole team. Okay, let's learn something here at this tournament. And I think he got a lot better come today, Monday, when he played in the final game here. He looked a little bit better. But overall, just how you put it, it was perfect. Just turnovers and lackadaisical play. Be more focused and more consistent in every single play every time you're on the ice, regardless of the situation. Now, is part of that because he didn't feel like he needed to be there? I'm not saying any of that. I'm not saying there's a bad attitude or anything there. It's just that's how Parekh is. He shows up to these games. He thinks he's the best player on the ice, and he plays like it, and that's fine. But also keep in mind that there's more to it than just trying to weave through 6-7 guys to get up the ice and score a goal. You got to have a little bit of structure in the game. If there's 2 guys coming in on you, trying to close you down on the wing, sometimes it's better to dump the puck in the net, into the back, into the zone, rather than try to weave yourself through to the net. So really good job there on the Zane Parekh. I agree with you a lot there, Robert. Just slow it down a little bit, Parekh. And we got to slow down the hype train of Parekh. People are talking about maybe he can play NHL games. His kid is not ready for NHL games. He will be soon. But I think the best thing for this guy is continue to let him develop and develop at the level where you can make these mistakes and learn from these mistakes. And that's your OHL for you.
Yeah. Can I just add to that a little bit?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Heading into the weekend, I did kind of think that I didn't mind the idea of maybe giving Parekh a few games, like NHL games, to start the season, just to give him a taste of what the NHL is like, the speed, you
Mm-hmm.
know, the smarts, the decision making, the systems, like all that kind of stuff. I thought it might be kind of smart to give him maybe like 3 or 4 games, let him play against like the Canucks and the Oilers, and play against guys like Hughes, Miller, Pettersson, McDavid, Draisaitl, and just give him that taste, and then let him go back to the OHL, understanding what it's like to be in at that level and what more he needs to do to add to his game to get there. But after this weekend, I don't know if he's even ready for that. The turnovers, like I keep mentioning the turnovers, but like the overtime winner when they lost to, I believe it was Winnipeg on Friday. It was just a brutal turnover. Like he enters the zone, and like you said, all he had to do was just dump the puck in or turn around and regroup, but he tried to do too much. Even today, he turned the puck over a couple times on goals. It was just like pretty uncharacteristic for a guy that's ninth overall. And um we don't need to go too deep into this, but like one thing I kind of wrote down was just like how do we feel about Parekh's attitude? Because he is extremely confident. You could even make an argument that he's pretty cocky,
Mm-hmm.
because I saw that he done an interview with Brendan Parker before they headed out to Penticton, and one of the things he mentioned was he's like, I know that I am the most confident person in any room I walk in. And just kind of hearing that, you're like, it kind of puts you off a little bit, because I really love when athletes and people playing for the Flames are confident people. I think that's critical when you're playing at the highest level. But
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, you kind of walk a fine line between being confident and cocky. So when you're cocky, I think that kind of starts to create maybe some issues with ego. And I don't think people, like teammates and people around the organization, would like to be around someone who is super cocky. So I just think Parekh, maybe he just needs to be a little bit careful moving forward, just about his attitude a little bit. Like I said, be very confident, be the most confident person you want to be, but try to walk that line and not be
Mm-hmm.
cocky, because I do think that could actually create some problems for him both on and off the ice at the pro level. So you don't have to talk about this if you don't want, but it is something that I did want to bring up today, because I do think it's important for him moving forward.
I like a guy who can be confident and have that swagger, as people would say, in their game. I love when they can bring that into the room and they can be like that, but you also have to be mature in that approach as well. And I think that's something he's definitely going to have to learn as he gets into higher levels here, because not everyone, like you said, not everyone's going to like it, but at the same time, if you can back it up and play well, then they can accept more of it. Just have to make sure that you're not just being a cocky guy that no one likes. Got to mature with it. You got to know when to hold back a little bit more and not. And I think these type of tournaments, maybe that was the approach with his attitude wasn't the best, but he's going to learn from this and grow from this. And that's the sign of a good player. So next time we see him during this main camp, does he have that confidence still? Does he still play with that swagger? And how does he go about interacting with his teammates? It'll all be key in his growth as a hockey player. It's more than just how you can play the hockey game. You have to do everything else that goes along with it, because that does affect the room and the group on the ice. Definitely, as you said there. So well
Yeah.
put there.
And I picture him walking in the Flames dressing room at training camp, and if he does have like a cocky attitude, what are guys like Nazem Kadri, been in the league forever, and Jonathan Huberdeau and Mackenzie Weegar and Blake Coleman, Michael Backlund, like what are they going to think of him coming into the room thinking that he's like God's gift to the Calgary Flames? So I just think he's just got to be a little careful with that. Like I said, I love confidence, and I love people that think that they're going to be successful. I think that's, like I said, super important at the highest levels. But I think he's got to be a little careful on being cocky. But like you said, it's all going to come with time. I think he is going to mature over the next few years here, and I don't think it's going to be an issue long term. But I thought it'd be kind of an interesting thing to talk about. But we can move on from that discussion. There are a couple more players I wanted to talk about, and these aren't negatives. These are just kind of guys that were in the spotlight, guys who people were talking about quite a bit online, and that's Sam Honzik and Matvei Gradin. So I think we'll maybe dive into Honzik a little bit. So I'll throw it to you first. What did you think of Honzik's game this weekend?
That's exactly where I wanted to go with this too. Is Sam Honzik? He was my guy that I had on this list as well. A lot of people, I saw people writing him off already on social media, so that's awesome. I saw other people calling him a bust. I saw other people saying, why did the Flames waste their time? And I just wondered how quickly we turned on a guy who only a couple years ago was the Flames first round draft pick, and how quickly we forget that a guy is coming off of two pretty big injuries last year and had no development time last year. I actually didn't mind Honzik this weekend, and that's because I saw progression from his game, from game to game, period to period. You saw progression. Consistency will still be a bit of an issue, but that'll come as he gets more comfortable playing in the system, get comfortable playing after coming back from, again, two big injuries last year. He lost a lot of time since he's been drafted through these injuries. If he can stay healthy and he can play regular minutes, say with the Wranglers, or if he goes back to junior, there's the options there, both for the Flames to take. Get confident. That's, I think, what Honzik needs right now, is just to play games and to be confident. And I find it ridiculous to write off a kid who doesn't turn 20 until November. We got to remember that. He doesn't turn 20 till November. Yes, it's been 2 years since he was drafted. Yes, a lot of players in their 20-year-old, 19-year-old seasons take big, massive leaps. And that's very true. This guy didn't have a 19-year-old season per se. He was injured for most of it. So I think what we need to remember is there's more to it than this. You're a first-round draft pick. You should automatically be an NHLer within 2 years and be a top six contributor, and you should be the next Patrick Kane and support all these goals. That's not how it always works for everybody, and Samuel Honzik is a good example of that. I'm going to preach a little bit of patience with this guy because I think there is skill there. I think there is something there for the Flames. Is this going to be a top line point per game player in the National Hockey League? Chances are probably not, but this still can be an effective middle six player, probably a winger, who can provide something to a team down the road here. You just got to let this kid play and develop and get to that point rather than throwing him out with the bathwater before his 20th birthday. I find it ridiculous that people are already giving up on a guy this quick. Would you have liked to see more from him this weekend? Sure, I can handle that argument and have that discussion, but overall, I think he was fine, and I think as he plays more, hopefully for me, it's with the Wranglers. So that's where I'd like to see him. Yeah. That's just personally me. Play with the Wranglers, play in a middle six role there, and just get some confidence, man.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I would just say that, development curves aren't linear. Some players, they can step in the NHL 19. Some guys, it takes them till 24, 25. Like, look no further than Martin Pospisil. He dealt with injuries for quite a long time, and it wasn't until last season when he was 24, 25 years old that he was finally able to step into an NHL lineup and make an impact. Mm-hmm. So I would agree. I would just say, just be patient with Sam Honzik. There is that crew that is skeptical. And I think that's fair, because I do believe what we've seen from Honzik so far is, like you said, we haven't seen a guy who's looks like that offensive dynamo. And that's too bad for the Flames, because he was the 16th overall pick in that 2023 draft. And that 2023 draft was regarded as, one of the best, if not the best, since 2003. So like the Calgary Flames, they have to hit on that pick. I was gonna say they have to hit a home run. They don't necessarily have to hit a home run, but they got to hit on that pick. Like, that's got to be a top six, like, forward. And I wasn't a huge fan of the pick at the time, because you look at some of the guys that went after him. So there's like Axel Sandin Pellikka. He looks like he could be a top 4D man. Oliver Moore, who the Blackhawks drafted, is one of the best skaters. Oh, he was the guy I really wanted the Flames to take at that position, but he's a center. He's incredibly skilled. One of the best skaters from that draft class, like ripped up NCAA, ripped up World Juniors. And then there's Gabe Perreault, who got 60 points in 36 NCAA games, ripped up World Juniors. And there's Quentin Musty, who had 102 points in 53 OHL games last season. Like, so I think that's kind of where fans are a little disappointed in Honzik, is because the guys that were picked after him, they have significantly higher ceilings right now. So I do understand why people are skeptical of Honzik, but at the same time, like we've been talking about, let's not write this kid off by any stretch. Like you said, there's not a lot of kids who can miss 50 games to injury and come back the next season at 100% and taking the huge stride in their development. It's not realistic. So give Honzig like 3 to 4 years to like really figure out his game, figure out what he's going to be at the NHL level. But at the same time, I do understand why people are skeptical of the player.
Mm-hmm.
So that's that. I think it's enough for Honzig here. Why don't we quickly talk about Matvei Gradin? We don't have to dive too deep into it because we want to touch a little bit on some training camp stuff. So I guess just overall thoughts from you on Matvei Gradin's weekend.
I changed my tune over a couple of days because I didn't actually particularly enjoy him in the opener. The more I watched him and the more I realized this is my first time watching this guy play. So over these games here, I learned what his game was. And he's not flashy until he has to be flashy. And so for me, I think he's a great hockey player. He's got a lot of hockey sense to him. He can think the game. He's got good feet. He's got a hell of a shot. We saw that at versus Vancouver when he scored that beautiful goal to kick off that game. But for me, it's just he disappears for chunks of games, and he'll have to learn how to be effective outside of scoring goals for the Flames or whoever he's playing with. Overall, I thought he had an okay weekend, but again, I'm still learning this guy's game. This was one player I full out admitted on draft day I knew absolutely nothing about. He wasn't on my radar. That's partly on me. But as I learn about this guy's game and as he grows as a hockey player, I just make sure you're visible more. Make sure that you are engaged in the play, even if it's not an offensive chance for me.
Yep, I completely agree with that. And the word you used for Honzig over the weekend was progression. Like he got better as the weekend went on. I thought the same thing could apply to Gradin. I thought he was, today on Monday was by far his best game of the tournament, where he made some sneaky, like really, really skilled plays. The goal he scored, that release was very quick. Like that puck was on and off his stick in an instant. Probably the best release I've seen from any Flames prospect at the tournament. So yeah, there's those flashes where you're like, okay, I understand what the Flames see in this player, but you are right. There are times where, you don't even notice that he's playing out there. He kind of reminds me a little bit of like Sean Monahan in the sense that he could be very quiet throughout the game, but then you end up looking at the score sheet and he's got like a goal and assist.
Yeah.
So I think Gradin might be that kind of player. So lots of intriguing prospects for the Calgary Flames this weekend in Penticton. Lots of good performances, and they're going to head into main camp now, which I believe starts on Wednesday. I thought it
good
would
old
be
fitness
fun.
testing.
Fitness testing sounds like an absolute nightmare for these players. I know Rhett Warner always talks about it, how much he hated it back in the day. It does not look like a fun day, but it seems like a necessary evil for these guys. So
I think it was Blake Coleman who was on the Fan 960. He was talking about how he, for that 2.5 minutes on the bike ride, he just grits his teeth and just does it because it's the worst 2.5 minutes of the year. And you just want to get it over with, but it feels like it's like half an hour type of thing. It just looks grueling, and it's a hard pass for me.
Totally, just an absolute nightmare. So to kick off our training camp discussion, I was thinking it might be fun to discuss, what our forward lines look like heading into camp, what our deep pairings could look like heading into camp. Do you have yours ready?
I do.
Are you good to go? Fantastic.
Okay,
why don't you start us off with the forwards? What lines do you want to see starting here on Thursday and Friday when they begin on ice sessions?
I love doing lines. Lines are so much fun because you can always have a lot of fun with what you want to see and what you think the team is going to do. But I went a different kind of a way because I wanted to do something where it spreads the lineup out, but also makes it fun to watch. So I have Sharangovich and Kuzmenko centered by Nazem Kadri. I kind of put a little bit of a one or the other with Backlund and Coleman. I have it could be Pelche or Coronado, depending who earns the spot there. And we'll talk about that later on in our little podcast here. Then I have Zari between Huberdeau and Mantha, and then I have Lundberg with Pospisil and Dewar. I really like how Pospisil's game can translate into fourth line role, and that line for me can produce a little bit more than just being a fourth line grind line.
Yep, I essentially have the exact same lines as you. The only difference being there's no Walker Dewar in my lineup. Not to be rude to Walker Dewar, but I personally don't think he's a full-time NHLer. He went on that hot run in the 2021-2022 season. 22-23. He went on that hot run where I believe it was about 20 games. He had, like 12 or 13 points and scored a bunch of goals. Outside of that sample size, I have not seen enough from Walker Duehr to have him in the opening lineup. Could he be 13th or 14th forward? That's, sure, why not? But I think it's important for the Calgary Flames to find a way to get both Coronado and Pelche in the lineup this season. Coronado mainly just for his development. I think he ripped up the AHL last year. I don't think he has too much more to prove at the AHL level, and I'd like to see him get into a top 9 role. So I have him with Coleman and Backlund to start. I think that's an excellent place for a young player. And then I have Pelche on a fourth line with Pospisil and Lomberg. So just take out Duehr, put in Pelche, and those are kind of my lines. I'm curious for you. Are there any sort of must-haves in the Flames lineup? Like, are there pairings that you think have to be together, or are you pretty open to the idea of moving players around?
I think you got to find the chemistry. I think the only two that have to be together is pretty strong, but Blake Coleman and Backlund just make too much sense to be together, and so take a lot for me to break those two up. But for everybody else, I think it's all about who's going to pair well with who. The closest to have to, I think, is Backlund and Coleman, and then maybe Kuzmenko with Kadri because of the chemistry we saw at the end of the last season. But with all of the changes to this lineup and trying to get these young kids in there and having Coronado and Pelche both trying to make full time, I think you got to be fluid with these things and trying to figure out who's going to play center. I think for me, you got to be fluid with who can play with whom and let it just work itself out naturally type of thing.
Yeah. For me, my must-haves are 100% Kadri and Kuzmenko have to play together. There is no working around it. Those two have to play together. I think they could be one of the more dynamic duos in the NHL next season. In the Flames' last 11 games of the year, when those two guys got put together, Kadri had 14 points in 11 games. Kuzmenko had 18.
Incredible.
And they had the best power play in the NHL because essentially of those two players and the chemistry they had. So I really believe that those two guys, if they stay together throughout the entire season or up to the point when Kuzmenko, is inevitably traded, I think they could both be a point per game plus players if they play together. Yeah. So that's kind of my must-have that I don't think is really getting talked about too much. Totally agree with you on Backlund Coleman. You want to keep them together, and it seems like the Flames are pretty steadfast on having Huberdeau and Mantha as a pairing. And then you could just insert either Pospisil, Zary, or whoever you want at center there, Sharangovich.
It's interesting you talk about Huberdeau and Mantha because I think Ryan Huska let something slip on the radio because he was talking about guys playing together. He also hinted at the Huberdeau and Mantha, and he said he might try Pospisil between those two guys, which would be an interesting trio to try during camp. But I wonder how that would work if Pospisil can do enough to be the defensive responsibility, because you put Mantha and Huberdeau on the ice together, that's a defensive nightmare if they get caught in their own zone. Yeah, because those guys don't defend. But it's interesting. It's worth trying out. And if Mantha can finish off Huberdeau's passes, maybe both these guys get going, up Mantha's value for a trade maybe later in the season. And who knows, maybe Huberdeau can find some confidence again.
Yeah, and Mantha's got a lethal shot too. If you haven't watched any Anthony Mantha highlights, I would highly recommend going to YouTube and checking them out because this guy can rip pucks. So that's kind of like why I like the idea of Zary and Huberdeau being with him, is because both those guys are natural playmakers, and maybe they could feed Mantha a little bit more. But I totally agree with you. The Flames should do everything in their power to ensure that those guys are starting in the offensive zone and starting against third and fourth lines, because that line could be a bit of a mess defensively. So
and maybe that's one of those shifts where you put Weegar and Anderson out together because you're kind of covered on the back end as well. Just something to protect those guys. I think Zary can do a good job of that as well, being a responsible two-way player. I think he can also take a bit of that burden away from those two guys defensively if it happens to come down to that type of thing. But yeah, heavy offensive starts, please, for those two. Otherwise, it could be a long night for a few guys.
Yeah, and I am personally, I don't know how you feel about this, but I am definitely not on team Sharangovich at center. I think he should be on the wing at all times. I don't think
much
he's
more
a very
productive on the wing
player. Way more productive on the wing. So yeah, the talk of Sharon Govich at center, I'm not personally a big fan of it. It doesn't sound like you are either. So
No,
there's
that's why I have both Zari and Pospisil down the middle of my lineup, and that's why I enjoy the talk of trying both those guys at center, because you had Sharon Govich, whose production was cut almost down to a third when he was in center compared to what he was on the wing.
yeah,
Huge,
and
huge gap.
I think it's important the Flames also find out what they have in Zary and Pospisil at center, because
100%.
they are so thin organizationally at center. You know, beyond Kadri Backlund, Zary Pospisil, like the next best center in the organization right now is Cole Schwint, and I don't think that's a good thing. So,
and I'm
I
not
think
sure. I'm not sure. I'm not sure Swint is an NHL centerman either. I think he plays wing when he comes up. I think he's much better on the wing at the NHL level. That's just my personal preference on the player.
Yeah,
So it's thin.
I agree with that. So if they could find out that like, hey, like both Zary and Pospisil can be centers, I think that's massive for their future. Like, I think that would be
100%.
huge. If you could have Zary and Pospisil as your second and third line centers for, you know, the next 5, 6, 7 years, you know, whatever that number may be, that's massive, because then now over the next 2 drafts here, you can go out and try to find that kind of franchise number one center. You have a replacement for Kadri and Backlund in terms of Zary and Pospisil, and then you put in that franchise guy that you get in the draft, and all of a sudden you're kind of set. So I think it's super important. Even like if it doesn't work out early on in the season, I would like to see them stick with Zary and Pospisil at center, because, like I said, I just think it's so important for the future of the franchise to lock down that position.
100%.
And if you can get
100%.
those two guys, that's fantastic.
I wonder if they're still going to go with the experiment of Samuel Honzik down the middle. They were going to try that last year, but those injuries again got in the way of that progression. I wonder if they still go down that road. I'm not sold as Honzik down the middle. I loved him on the left wing, and who knows what Jaden Lipinski can be down the road for the Flames too. So you just never know, but it's got to be the main focus for the Flames now. Fix that center position.
Yep. No, couldn't agree more. How about defense? What are your D pairings look like?
I love this, and I know I'm going to take a beating in the comments, but that's okay. I took the new guys and I took the old veterans here, and I split them all up so you have the lefts on the left and the rights on the right, because I like the depth of having Anderson and Uyghur on different pairings. And so I put Bean with Anderson because I like the style of games. I think they could pair well together. I think Ball would work very well with Uyghur. And then I have Solovyov making the roster. I love Hanley, but he can be the seventh guy. And I have him with Miramanov because I like a stay-at-home guy with Miramanov that can run. I think Miramanov got a little bit miscast playing in a top 4 role. I think he was a little bit over his skis at the end of last season. He looked good at times, but then he looked like he was underwater at other times. So I like him in a third pair role a little bit more. And then he can specialize being a power play 2 type of guy for the Flames.
So then that means that they don't sign Tyson Barrie, and then would you have Pahal on waivers going down to the Wranglers?
I would. I would sign Barrie, but as a 7 type of thing.
Okay, interesting.
I think they're gonna sign Barrie, but I think he's a 7. I don't think he's an everyday guy. I think Nashville used Barrie properly last year.
Perfect. Okay, so we have different D pairings, which is fantastic. So I'll start mine with, I'm putting Kevin Ball and Rasmus Anderson together. So you have Ball on the left side, Rasmus on the right, and I would use them as my shutdown pair, because I was just like looking at like some of the analytics and some of the models that people put together, and actually rates Kevin Ball as like a good defensive player. That he does kind of seem like a bit of a black hole offensively, which is fine because you have Rasmus that can move the puck and he can join the rush and all that kind of stuff. So I think there could be a decent pairing between them. And I'm high on Kevin Ball. Like I genuinely believe he's going to become a top 4 defenseman. Maybe not a number 3, maybe more that kind of number 4 defenseman shutdown guy, but I really think he's going to get there. And then my second pair, I'm going Uyghur Miramanov. Those two, they played together pretty much from the moment Miramanov got to Calgary. And so this is interesting looking at the eye test compared to the numbers, because I actually agree with you. I thought Miramanov was just okay, and there were times I thought he was like in a little over his head playing in the top 4. But then you look at the numbers, and him and Uyghur were like a pretty dominant defense pairing. The shot share was, I believe, like 57% in their favor. They outscored their opposition 12-8 at 5-on-5. Like there were a lot of analytics that that show that they were like a really good pairing and a good possession pairing. But
Thank you,
my eye
Uyghur.
test, exactly, yeah. But my eye test with those two guys, it didn't necessarily add up. So I'm trusting the numbers on putting those two guys together to start the season. And then for a third pair, I'm going Jake Bean on the left, and then one of Tyson Berry or Braden Bahal on the right. I think the Flames, I'm with you. I do think the Flames will probably sign Tyson Berry and use him as a 6-7 and potentially run their first power play unit. And I think that honestly, the big reason they brought him in, I know a lot of people already talked about this, is because he is like such like a high character guy, and people absolutely love him. They rave about him. And I think that's important to Craig Conroy and Ryan Huska right now. I think they want good, like solid people and veterans in the locker room. So, it might not necessarily be all on ice for Tyson Berry. I think there'd be an off ice component there too. So, yeah, Ball Anderson, Uyghur Miramanov, Bean Berry. That's what I have right now. I'm curious, what are your thoughts on Kevin Ball? Because like I know I'd mentioned that I'm pretty high on him. I think he could be a good player. What are your thoughts of him heading into the season?
What I like here is that both we have different defensive groupings, and that shows just how many options there are for Ryan Huska. As for Kevin Ball, I like Kevin Ball. I think when we made that trade for Markstrom, I let out a yes in my work truck because I like Kevin Ball. I like the game that he brings, and I like what he can do defensively. He is not going to give you any points, absolutely 0 points. But neither did Robin Regeer, and look how Robin Regeer turned out. I'm not saying Ball is Robin Regeer, but that style of player can really have a good NHL career to his name. I like what Kevin Ball brings. If he's with the right guy, I like him with Anderson or Uyghur. I think he'd have a really good career NHL wise, and he's a big body, and he knows how to use his size. He knows how to use his reach. He has an active stick. I'm high on this guy, and he's still fairly young. Like he's still right in that development age where he's still coming into his own, and I think there's a lot more there for Kevin Ball. I think he was the outlier in New Jersey because he was just part of the numbers game there that pushed him to the outside. When you got guys like Hughes and Nemec coming in New Jersey, a guy like Kevin Ball is going to find himself down the lineup a little bit more, and that's what happened. Flames are going to capitalize. I think we're going to be very happy with Kevin Ball.
And New Jersey desperately needed a goalie, so they had to give to get. And I do think that's the case of Ball. And the one other thing I'll point out, I pointed this out a few times on social media and on some of my articles at Flames Nation, but Ball last summer was rehabbing an injury for about 3 months, and he said that he didn't really have like a true opportunity to get into game shape heading into last season. But now this year he's had a full off season of being 100% healthy, training, getting his leg strength, his skating up to kind of NHL pace. And I think that could actually also play a pretty big role in him having a pretty big year with the Flames.
And he played all 82 games for New Jersey last year. You don't get a ton of defensemen that play his style that can play all 82 games and not look like he's underwater while doing so. So I think Kevin Ball flying under the radar a little bit here for Flames fans. Everyone's all wanting these high-flying defensemen. Well, Kevin Ball paired with a Brustevich down the line or even a Perek down the line really could be a reality for the Flames and work out to be really, really good, much like a Scott Stevens and Scott Niedermayer. I know those are Hall of Fame guys, type of defensive pairing where you got your stay-at-home guy, your offensive guy, and they pair well together.
Yep. Couldn't agree more. With goalies, I mean, it's kind of hard to talk about goalies because, really all three of them kind of have the same chance at making the team this year. But I'm just curious, do you have sort of a hunch or a gut feel as to who do you think is going to emerge as the starter heading into training camp?
I don't have a hunch, but I will say a couple things here. One, we can't forget that Wolf still doesn't require waivers, so there is still that possibility he starts in the American League and gets games later in the season. Don't sleep on Devin Cooley. The way that they talk about Devin Cooley is like they found a Mika Kiprasov light. That's how they're talking about this guy in Flames circles. And I think he has every opportunity to come in here and steal games away from both Vladar and Wolf. I think we're going to see all three guys play, and all three guys play a significant number of games. And as the season progresses, it'll finally whittle itself down to two from three. But I wouldn't sleep on any of these three guys because I think they all have the same opportunity in front of them. I know we all want to see Wolves start, 45 games, but I just don't know if we're going to get that this year. I think we could see 30 and 30 and the rest goes to the other guy type of thing. I really think all three of these guys are going to play and play significant games.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And if I did have like a kind of a gut instinct, I'm kind of with you. I just have this feeling that Logan Cooley is going to emerge as a really, really important piece of this Flames puzzle moving forward. It's just based off the way the Flames talk about him, based off the way Jordan Sigalet talks about him. They think that there's truly something there, like something special. And I don't want to use this as an example, to really like force my opinion on Cooley, but like I was at Winsport the other day. I was just there watching the rookies practice, and then the Flames were practicing on the sheet beside them. So when the rookies session was over, I went and just watched some of like the NHLers practice for a little bit, and Logan Cooley was making insane save after insane save. So like the Flames, they were doing these drills where they're essentially like 2-on-0s, and a winger would come down and shoot and try to get a rebound, and the other guy would try to bury it, and nobody could beat Cooley. It was crazy. I was watching. I'm like this guy looks like the best goalie I've ever seen. Now, like I said, this is a summertime September practice, even before training camp. So I'm not saying that that's the reason why I think he's going to be really good, but just kind of like a cool little anecdote that I saw the other day. But yeah, I just kind of this sneaking suspicion Cooley's going to emerge as a decent goalie, and I'm personally not a Dan Vladar guy. I would be more than okay if the Flames look to trade him or put him on waivers and start him in the American League. He did have that great year, his first year in Calgary, but I mean, look at the team he was playing in front of. It was the best defensive team in the NHL. Jacob Markstrom got 9 shutouts, and he looked incredible in front of them too. So, and then 22, 23, I did not think he had a good year. Last year, he did not have a good year. I know there's the hip issues that he's got solved, but yeah, I'm not a huge Dan Vladar guy. So I think I'd personally like to see, at some point during the season, a Wolf Cooley tandem, and either try to move Vladar or put him on waivers and have him in the American Hockey League, because I'm not a huge Vladar guy.
Yeah, it's fair. Like I really don't know what Vladar is as a goaltender between the injury and that one outlier season. What actually is he at this level? All three guys are going to get their opportunity and get their fair shake at it. I honestly believe this. And so I don't know where it's going to shake out. I just know that if we're all preparing for Dustin Wolf to get 40 to 45 starts, I think we're all going to be disappointed in that. Expectations, we've got to manage those a little bit. Just who's ever going to be at the end of the day, don't sleep on any of these three guys, because any of these three guys could take the reins and run with it. I don't know. For sure, just don't sleep on Cooley. That's my big takeaway from this. Is just the way they talk about this guy is the way Sutter talked about Kiprusoff. And I know he's not going to be Kiprusoff, but that's just what you get from the Flames. The vibe you get from the Flames is don't sleep on this guy. There's something here, and he's going to have an opportunity. I would bet even money here that Devin Cooley starts as the Flames' #1 guy in day one on this team. If the way that they're talking about this guy, so
I love that.
Interesting how it shakes up.
Bold prediction from John. I absolutely love that, because I'm kind of with you on that too. And the thing with Vladar too is like he's not really part of the Flames' future, because next season both Cooley and Wolf are going to require waivers, and Vladar's contract's up at the end of this year. So I don't really see him being part of the Flames moving forward, unless he just has a ridiculous training camp and has a fantastic year. But
Agreed.
I think Wolf and Cooley are kind of the guys moving forward. So the goaltending battle is definitely going to be one of the more interesting things to watch in training camp.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely is. I think it's probably the #1 thing to watch in camp. And I think right after that, you have that conversation of, can you find room for both Coronado and Jacob Pelche in the forward ranks here? We just went through our forward lines, and we had them in different spots, and we weren't sure how to put them in there. I think we have two guys here in these two players that have to have themselves a camp and show that they're ready to be NHLers. I think Coronado did a lot of good work last year in the AHL. And he was only okay when he came up to the NHL. Now he's got to show that he's able to take that next step and be an everyday NHLer. And it's and I hate to say this about Pelche, because I like the guy and he's coming off an injury, but when it's now or never for this guy. He requires waivers coming up here. He's on a 1-year contract. If it's not now, when is it for Jacob Pelche? And I really want to see this guy succeed. again, Flame fans giving up on a first round draft or first round draft because he hasn't popped right away. But if he pops here and he can find himself a role, even in a fourth line role, I think that'd be huge for the Flames to let these guys get in the lineup and allow the young kids to continue to play and show that progression. So 2 big training camps, both in net and the forward group for me going into this year.
If they put Pelche on waivers, do you think he get claimed?
I think there is a good chance because that first round draft status does give you sway still. And I think that it just takes one general manager thinking, hey, well, I think I can fix this guy and I have a spot. A team like a San Jose, do you think they can't throw him on their bottom 6 because they have a spot for a guy like Pelche and let him figure it out? That type of team would come to mind for me and saying, yeah, I think he would get claimed.
Yeah, I'm with you, but like the perspective I kind of have on it is if it was just Jacob Pelche's on ice play and people were just evaluating that, I actually think he might fall through waivers. But for me, it's the person. Like if teams do their research and they realize like what an incredible kid this guy is, what a leader he is, what incredible energy he brings to a team, I think people would be willing to take a risk on that. And I think that's the reason he would get claimed on waivers because the last couple of years, he had a good AHL season a couple of years ago, but last season in particular, he struggled with the injuries and he didn't have a great year when he did come back. He was playing pretty tentative, and I don't blame him. I mean, when you go through shoulder surgeries like that, that's tough.
Sucks.
But yeah, I'm with you, man. I just really hope that he does have a great training camp because I really want him to make the team. I'm a big fan of the person Jacob Pelche, and I'd love to see him be a longtime member of the Flames. Like I could totally see him being a fixture in the bottom 6 on the wing, wearing a letter, being a big time culture guy for the club. I do think there's a pretty bright future there potentially. Hopefully he can put it all together here.
It's a huge camp for this guy. Absolutely. He has to hit the ground running. And it doesn't necessarily mean he's to have like an 8-point preseason, but just show the progression in your game. Show that you're not scared to take the hit in the corner that maybe got you injured in the first place. Just show a little something, a little bite to your game. This guy knows how to put the puck in the net for sure, but show that you're adaptable to play a more well-rounded game. Take on a fourth line role if you have to. Show that you're adaptable to the Flames and show that you have value there still, that the Flames can trust you to put you as an everyday NHLer. Like you're going up against guys like Rooney and Dewar, and you got to be able to beat those guys out, and you should beat those guys out to be an everyday NHLer. It's no question in my mind. I really want to see it happen for him. I really, really do because I like the kid.
Even if he doesn't like beat them out on merit, I still think the Flames should give him a chance in the NHL before
I agree
they would send him to the AHL because Pelche, he has the potential to be a big part of your future, way more than Kevin Rooney, Walker Dewar, Adam Klapka, like any of those guys, Dryden Hunt. Like those guys are all kind of filler pieces.
Yep.
Pelche has the potential to be on your team for a long time and be an important person. So that's going to be fascinating to watch. I don't know if you have anything else to bring up. There's one more thing I thought we could maybe talk about before we sign off on our first episode here.
Do it.
I'm curious. Do you think there's anyone from the AHL or a junior player who's going to kind of break down the door and really make things difficult for the Flames in terms of giving them a roster spot? And I guess like the example I would give was, Josh Juris back in the day in the 2014-15 season. He had a phenomenal preseason. He did end up getting sent down, but then he got brought back up about 2 or 3 weeks later and was a mainstay on the team. And he kind of came out of nowhere. So I'm curious, like, are there any guys that might come out of nowhere in this training camp that could push for a roster spot?
Mangiapane did something similar to that too as well, and so did Dubé. My quick answer is no, and my reason for that is you saw the Flames give a lot of opportunity to a lot of guys last year. We saw a lot of guys get their debut. You saw guys like Klapka come up and stuff like that. So those guys are all on the radar, and those guys that you might see play. I have Solovyov in my lineup to start the season.
That's a good
for
one.
heaven's sakes. So I don't know if anyone is going to come out of nowhere and surprise the Flames. I think a guy like Solovyov is the closest to pushing for a full-time job or to at least start the season with the Flames. So, but my quick answer is I don't see anybody other than that that's going to push open the door here. We all coming off this high Brustevich thing we saw in Penticton. I still think he's a long ways off from being in the NHL, but it's a nice story to have. But I don't see anybody. Interested though to see if you have anybody that comes to mind.
I'm kind of with you. I don't. I mean, some of the candidates could be like a guy like Sam Morton, William Stromgren. Could Honzek step up and have a big time camp? Yan Kuznetsov, Jeremy Poirier. There's a lot of guys who are kind of candidates for that type of role, but I'm with you. I don't see it happening. The Flames training camp roster, it's pretty deep, I would say. It doesn't have like the most talent, but it's pretty deep, and I think it's gonna be tough for younger players, the guys that I had just mentioned. I think those guys are going to be on the outside looking in, but at some point those guys will get another shot in the NHL, whether it's because of injuries or trades or whatever it may be, or just strong performance in the AHL.
Yeah,
I think a lot of those guys will end up getting games, but to start the season, I just don't see it happening. I think the guys that we had been talking about in our forward lines and our deep pairings, I think those are the guys who are going to start the year in the NHL.
I think after the trade deadline, you're going to see the traditional, this guy's going to get his debut. Like I can see Jeremy Poirier coming up at the end of the season. Here's a game or two based on your play in the AHL. Here's a job for you, Sam Morton, for a game because, you had a really good season, that type of thing. But no one's really, for me, going to pop off to start the year here and say, hey, I'm here. And if Samuel Honzek did that, I will be the first in line to buy his jersey and celebrate his achievement because that would be awesome for the Flames. But I just don't see it based on all the injury history we saw last year through these type of players like Honzek and Poirier were all injured last year. And guys like, I just don't know if Klapka or a Sam Morton is an everyday NHL, or these are guys you call up throughout the year to fill in for a game or two because there was an injury or a guy needs a day off type of thing. That's how I view those type of players.
Yep. I completely agree with you.
All right. Well, we've gone an hour, and we talked about this earlier. We could probably go another hour. We barely touched our preseason, our training camp conversation. We'll have tons more of that coming up on different shows to go. Before we sign off, Robert, is there anything else that you want to bring up on the show today? Anything else you want these listeners or viewers to know?
No, I mean, to the people who have downloaded and are watching, I just want to say thank you very much. And if you have any feedback for us, be sure to send us a DM either on our personal Twitter accounts or the show account. We'd love your feedback, or if there are any topics that you want us to talk about, we'd be more than open to hearing about those things. So thank you. And yeah, I think this was awesome. This time absolutely flew by. Whenever you and I talk Flames, John, time just seems to fly by. So
right.
It's been a great first episode, and I am very excited to continue this throughout the season. It's going to be fun.
I'm very happy to be alongside Robert here on the Red Mile Rundown. Follow the social media accounts. It's at Red Mile Rundown. We made it really simple. Search Red Mile Rundown on YouTube if you want to watch Robert and I look at one another for an hour. And bear with me as I work through getting all your links up. Your Apple and all of those will have the Spotify link up. They will all be working soon, very, very soon. Hopefully after this episode, I got to make sure everything works well. And thank you for joining us here on the debut episode of the Red Mile Rundown. We will be back every Tuesday in your favorite podcatcher. So stay with us, and don't forget to follow both of us also on social media at Vintage Johnny 84, and Robert, you are Ring of Fire CGY, if I have that correct.
That is correct.
Awesome. Thanks so much, guys. We will see you next week on the show. Enjoy, and